So, thank you all for coming very much. My name is Diana Costello. I run the Monadnock International Film Festival, and I'm so pleased to see such a nice crowd here today. I do want to start by thanking a couple of sponsors. Silver Direct, who is our production partner, the Putnam Foundation, CNS Wholesale Grocers, Keene State College, Consensus Technology. Those are all of our major sponsors. So let's just give them a little hand and say thank you. And I want to thank all of the many, many sponsors, volunteers, donors who help make this festival possible every year. We could not do it without their help. I hope you all had a chance to see Ghostlight and Uber X today. How many of you did get to see it? Cool, cool. So we had a little change in our panel. Lisa Bosnar actually got cast in a job and is on her way to New York. But we have her husband here, Steve Jackson, who runs the Park Theater. So he is going to do moderator duty today. And we've got an incredible panel. But I'm going to turn this over to Steve, and he will do all of the introductions. Thank you very much.
I think you'll leave that one down. Hello? Well, thank you, Diana, and everyone on the MONIFF team. It's a pleasure for me to do some pinch-hitting work for my wife and any of the actors in the room, and we know we have a few, know that when you get a call on a job that they're calling for you, and it's a SAG residual job, you scurry away quickly. But Lisa sends her best to everyone here, and hopefully I'll be able to fill her shoes. But I am as Diana said, I'm the CEO of the new Park Theater in Geoffrey, which for those is about a 20-minute drive, a little less, over to east of here. And we are, it's got a long history, but the news right now is that we are in the build of a new performing arts center, which will have two theaters, 360 seat and 120 seat. And the best news about that is MONIFF has been waiting, the festival's been waiting for years for us to start so that they have some additional places to screen all of the great films that the filmmakers bring. So we are hoping we open March of next year is the target, that we will be showing wonderful films like the two we're going to be talking about very shortly in one of our theaters at the Park Theater Complex. So that's about it from my end, but let's find out about our wonderful panel, and I think the best thing to do is why don't we just go down one after the other and give us a little bit of a background, starting with Caroline as an actor, and move it on all the way down.
Great. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Caroline Portu. I actually just drove in from New York this morning. I had a show last night that went until about 1 a.m. So I currently live in New York. I grew up doing theater my whole life. I'm also a professional singer. And then I've just been I started doing like TV and film in Boston when I was about 18, and luckily I kind of stumbled into these two guys and was able to be part of this lovely project. But so that's a little bit about me.
And I'm John Stimpson. I'm writer and director. I live in Central Mass, so not far from here. I think I'm a lot closer than some of the people that came in from New Hampshire. I was only about 45 minutes for me. I came back from a stint in Hollywood about 30 years ago, and I never went back. And I've been proud to make my career in film and television here in New England. And now with about 15 movies under my belt and a whole bunch of TV work as well. I'm happy to call this home and love the fact that with the projects that we've been able to work on, we've been able to bring up a lot of local filmmakers, both actors as well as production folks as well, get them started in some smaller jobs that get them into the unions and start their careers. And I've been so proud to see these little birdies hop out of the nest and fly away, which has been great. So it's fun. It's fun to have a career and do what I love and do it here in New England.
Hi, my name is Jeff Taylor, writer-producer of Ghostlight with John. I actually made movies in LA for 30-plus years, mostly with studios. Moved back here several years ago to raise my daughters in a more civilized environment. But I did grow up in New Hampshire as a kid. I don't have any connection. I grew up in Nashua. I could see the Monadnocks out of my bedroom window. The Sleeping Indians were sort of part of the mythology, so it's a thrill to be here. Actually, Keene State is always a great place, and Keene, my favorite city in New Hampshire, so that's still true. It's just so. I started I'm a lawyer. I started as a comedy writer. I won a contest at Fox, but ended up coming here, meeting John. He and I had kicked around ideas, and this one stuck. Made the movie. It's a thrill, and we're so happy to be here to talk to you about it.
Hi, I'm Matt Braunsdorf. I'm the director of UberX. I went to school in Keene State, double major film and theater. In fact, the woman who taught me everything is right here today, Peggy Ray Johnson. After graduating from Keene, I went to New York. That's where I live now. I started working in film, and I also joined the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, which is where I met John. And John and I have been making sketches and short films for about 7 years now, something like that. And it's pretty good. So we're going to keep doing it. Yeah.
I'm Jonathan Marballi. I wrote, produced, and acted in UberX. I lived in LA for 3 years and just moved back like a year ago, so that's why UberX is set there. But I'm back in New York. Let's see. I went to Ohio State years ago. I majored in computer science and theater. I don't know.
Versatile.
Yeah. What else are we saying?
Anything you want.
That's my deal. And it's my first time in Keene, and I love it.
Well, we're talking about two comedies, so I'm sure there's going to be some natural laughs that come from this side and hopefully from that side. The one thing I noticed about both films, and I thought just before we get into certain aspects of each film, one thing that both of these films have done, and we're in one right here today, is, it's according to how up-to-date your IMDb site is for both, but I see 5 awards already at film festivals for each one of these films, which is pretty, amazing. And maybe the folks who created these wonderful films don't want to talk about, sometimes they may feel, well, maybe not, maybe they want to brag. But starting with UberX, what I see on the list here is Director's Choice short film at the Austin Revolution Film Festival, Best Comedy at the Cape Fear Independent Film Festival, Best Ensemble and Best Short Screenplay at the LA Comedy Festival, and Best Actor, Jonathan, at the Discover Film Awards. That's a nice list. And that deserves...
Sorry, hold on. There's something on my shoulder.
But not to be outdone, we go over to Ghostlight, and you guys have been picking up the silver and the medal. The Feature Film Award at the Austin Film Festival, the Jury Award at the Austin Film Festival, the Audience Best Feature at the Oxford, Mississippi Film Fest. Roger Bart got the Best Acting Award at Oxford, and the Best Ensemble Cast at the Woodstock International Film Festival. So, and the reason I bring this up just as a starter is if you guys could comment on what is the importance of doing film festivals like the Monadnock International Film Festival, New Hampshire, and everything coast to coast here, and you guys have clearly, by the geography, you're out and you're showing your films. But if anyone would like to take this question as a start from either side of each film.
I'll happily jump in. I think for a short film versus a feature, it's probably different stories and different advantages and benefits to getting your movie out there. But I mean, for us, it's been a way to find our audience, to get the movie out there and get people talking. We actually began our festival almost a year. Gosh, we started back. Well, it hasn't been a year. It's been.
Yeah, it was September. Of last
Yeah,
year.
September we premiered at the LA Film Festival, which was a great place for us to premiere, even though it was the last annual LA Film Festival.
We killed it. We killed that festival.
But it was a great place to premiere the film because we were able to get all kinds of distributors and buyers to come see our film. Because for us, it's really about selling the movie, making the money back for our investors that have sunk a considerable amount of money into this, and because we made it truly as an independent film. We just sort of begged, borrowed, and stole the money from people. Didn't steal it, but we got a bunch of people together that really believed in our project, and that's hard work. And and we really want to do the best we can to make it worth their while. And we've been pretty lucky. We've got a lot of interest in it. Well, not only interest, but we've been able to sell the film. We have a distributor out in New York called Giant Pictures who's taking it out digitally, so it'll drop on Amazon and iTunes and
Wherever
a bunch of other
streams.
digital platforms. In this spring, we partnered with the Folger Library to do some theatrical screenings in DC with them. And we're talking to some other Shakespearean companies to see if we can dovetail with them over the summer. And then we made a deal with Showtime, which is terrific. So Showtime will have our film come the fall. And then we have all the foreign sales. So anyway, for us, the festivals are a terrific way to get out there, find an audience, and ultimately sell the movie.
Great.
I mean, so this is maybe specific, I don't know, but what I found for these film festivals for me, because I'm still like a very new screenwriter, and because we met doing comedy at the Upright Citizen Brigade in New York, you get immediate feedback because you're doing shows in front of an audience. And really, festivals are the only chance I get to see, like, if it works in front of, like, a real crowd instead of, like, our friends and peers or whatever watching around our TV. So to me, that's, like, immensely. Every time we do this, I take all the learning and I put it into the next one we're working on. So that's become a necessary part of my process.
And to piggyback on that, knowing that for our last two shorts that we had in festivals, before our first screening, he would be just a mess of nerves. We'd have a bunch of shots, and I'd be like, don't worry, the movie's good. It's a good movie. Relax, it's good. And then we'd see it in front of an audience, and people would laugh. It's mostly stuff we didn't think was funny. And then afterwards, he's like, I got this. We're good. It's and then in terms of, like, from a short film perspective, I think we look at it mostly as street cred. To be able to say, when we go to do our next short, hey, our last two shorts were award winners. We played at, such and such festivals. This is the third short that I've had that's been in festivals, and this is the one that's been in the most. My first short got into 5, then last year was 8, and now we're up to 19 with UberX. So it's nice to see that, like, people are finding out about us. Some film festivals that turned us down with our previous film accepted UberX. So, like, it's building relationships with these festivals that see you improve as a filmmaker, hopefully to the point where they accept you. And hopefully next time it'll be Sundance or Tribeca or one of those, who knows? And it's nice to have on the IMDb. So when fancy people out in LA are looking us up, they're like, oh, they won some awards. This is
We
great.
really kept our IMDb's up to date, huh? It's pretty impressive.
Well done.
And there really are tiers of festivals. This is no knock on Monadnock. This is fabulous to be here, and to have one in New Hampshire like this is kind of wonderful. But in the festival world, there's like 5 or 6 that really are game changers for a film if you're in them, and you know who they are. Basically, it's Tribeca, Sundance. Toronto is this mothership.
South by Southwest.
South by Southwest, and then of course Telluride. and those, and AFI a little bit. But anyway, when you see them, and what's happened in the, the quote-unquote independent business, and John and I have learned this because, taking the journey, is that the play is really, in those major festivals, primarily the inside track, and it's become part of the distribution network for the studios and the big money people in the business. And yes, the independent films still have a place there, but like Lady Bird, which was, the independent film hit, it was produced by Scott Rudin, had the $10 million budget, and premiered at Telluride. Yes, it was a wonderful, very successful independent film, but don't kid yourself, there's tiers of this. So what we have done, because I think we've been in Austin is a wonderful festival, we were in Savannah, is that if you're in those places, to maximize whatever you can for, like John said, word of mouth. Because in the end of the day, word of mouth is everything in movies. When you leave, if you like your movie, please tell everybody you know, because that is what makes movies work. More than anything else, you cannot trick the audience into enjoying a movie.
And speaking of which, you guys can be our ambassadors for both films.
Yeah.
No, really.
Yeah.
You go on IMDb, go and rate it. Tell people. I mean, whatever.
That does matter.
That really makes a difference. And so,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. But anyway,
Be
this
proponents.
festival thing it's fascinating what it's become. There are what, John? What do you think? 300 festivals in the world?
So many.
There's
so
there's
many.
probably
Yeah.
300 festivals in the
Yeah.
world.
But it's
3,000?
3,000.
There you go.
Yeah. But it is really.
But
But
19 is really good.
well, especially for a short film, because there's so many more shorts that get submitted to festivals. So
Yeah.
you guys,
Yeah,
that says
congratulations.
something.
Well done.
And the concern with us is running time, because my first short was 19 minutes, and a lot of festivals are like, if
Too
this
long.
is good, but anything longer than 15 minutes, it better be Citizen Kane, because you're taking up the spot of 2 shorts.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
So then with UberX being 16 minutes,
yeah.
thankfully it worked out.
Good for you. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
You make what you got to make,
Caroline, as an actor, have you done it, and obviously you've got some family connections to the state of New Hampshire, but have you done gone to any of the festivals as an
I went
actor?
to the LA Film Fest,
Premiere.
which was
Yeah.
so
There you go.
great because I have a bunch of friends out in LA, and I had finally got to see them. So yeah, that was wonderful, great opportunity, beautiful theater. I think that was the one that I went. No, and then I went to one.
Did you go to Woodstock?
I
No.
don't remember.
Yeah.
I went to one more somewhere here in the Northeast.
Must have been
Where was
Woodstock.
it? It wasn't a festival. Was it a showing?
I think you went
Yeah,
to
it
the
was just-
screening.
it was-
A
that was
screening.
just-
So I've been to one festival.
yeah.
I'm a festival newbie, you could say. Yeah.
There,
All right, well, I'm going to switch from festivals to getting right into the films. But from the writer's standpoint, we're talking about comedy here. What, and I'll say, starting with Ghostlight, after watching Ghostlight, I mean, it reminded me of even some of the, I was thinking of a film, I said to Lisa afterwards, it reminds me of Hold That Ghost. Now, do you know that film? Does anybody know Hold That Ghost?
that one.
Anyone?
No.
Abbott and Costello,
I've-
1941.
I don't remember the title. I know
And,
this.
you know,
Yeah.
it just had that same kind of, I mean,
Ridiculous?
when there's craziness, it was that type of craziness. And it's when everyone is contained in a predicament and they're trying to figure their way out of it. And yes, and you have your characters, and there's so many characters in Ghostlight that, you know, from one to the other. But what I was just wondering from comedy, what were the influences from the writers that you've used in your filmmaking, and just why do you like comedy? And have you only done, I'm assuming with all the films you guys have done, you probably have done more than comedy.
Oh, yeah.
But why, how does comedy attract you as a creative platform?
Oh, gosh. I think Jeff and I laughed more making this movie. I mean, it was just a...
We cried a little.
No,
Yes,
but
we
I mean,
laughed.
it was just the process of writing. Well, just back it up a little bit. For us, writing this movie was 90% talking.
Yeah.
It was sitting in a room. After I pitched this idea, I said, what about a story about a Shakespeare troupe that unleashes the curse of the Scottish play? And he goes, oh my God, that's great, because he happened to be an English major who was a Shakespeare buff, and so he got it right away. And I had spent a lot of time in the theater, and I thought this was always fun. It would be fun to explore the superstitions of the theater. And anyway, so the fun of it was coming up with what happens? What is the manifestation of this curse, first of all? And then the arc of the story, and then who these crazy people were that were inhabiting this troupe. And so it was really a fun journey. And so in terms of, I don't know if there were any direct influences that drove the style of the writing, or if it were more, it was just sort of came out, you know, organically from the material, because it just served itself so nicely to take this with a little bit tongue in cheek, because it's not a very serious thing. It is serious that people die.
Yeah.
But it had to be, you know, it had to have a comic twist to it. So
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, there are certain great, like a Beetlejuice type of thing, or Noises Off.
Noises Off.
Because, you know, again,
Yeah.
not that we were imitating, but, you know, you look at those because it's about a group of, you know, improbable and inept people who suddenly are thrown into this life and death situation, which, you know, if you find the comedy in death, I guess you've succeeded as well as anything. So we were worried we had to kill two of them. But you know, it's hopefully at the end it's enough of a why don't they call 911? Those kind of things just go by the board, because we've already sucked you into this idea that this is a universe which, you know, it is improbable but amusing. So I always worked in comedy as a producer for years with a guy named Paul Mazursky in LA. So we did, you know, Down on Beverly Hills and Moscow on the Hudson and a bunch of movies. And anyway, so comedy to me is sort of like, that's, you know, they used to say, and again, I'm not saying John and I are in this group, but they used to always have in the 30s and 40s in Hollywood, they had at every, like at Fox's dining room, they had the middle table in the dining room was the comedy table. And that's where, if you were at the comedy table, you were the absolute tops of the industry, because nothing is harder than comedy. As a Shakespearean actor said, death is easy, comedy is hard, and it's kind of the truth. But you know, here's the part about comedy. There's a little thing a friend of mine used to have over his desk when he wrote. He said it was funny when it left here, and that is kind of the thing that you were saying, that you don't really know. In fact, even today, so a couple of things people are laughing at John, going, God, they thought that was funny. Nobody's ever laughed at that before. You know, or there's a couple of lines which I cannot believe people still don't laugh at, but they do.
You think they're funny as
hell.
hell.
We laugh at them. But anyway, so I know that's a very oblique way of talking about it.
And then there's what we think is funny on the page, and then there's what's funny when it comes out in the performance, or what the actors bring to it. Because you never quite know who you're going to have inhabit these characters for you, and everybody brings their own personality, and we were blessed to have such an amazing cast. I mean, guys like Scott Adsit.
Yeah, well, luckily, I think, and you guys know, I mean, he's straight from UCB. He was Second City.
Great.
So we had this guy, Scott Adsit. But I think a lot of our players, too, were improvisationally based, just like very, you know, trained in comedy, trained in Second City, trained at UCB, Groundlings. And so, you know, people came in and it was just bam, 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 and we could just like riff off each other. Some things weren't written. It was like very, really off the cuff.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Or just little moments like when they catch you guys making out backstage, and there's that thing, you know, Caroline, you better know your lines, or, you know, Annabelle, your character, and, you know, it's looks, it's things, it's little moments, and it's just getting them the actors in a circumstance or a situation where funny things happen, and allowing them the breath and the room to experiment and improv and. Without slowing us down too much.
That is the risk you take.
We were on a tight schedule.
20 days.
Yeah, we shot our movie in 20 days, which that was ambitious.
And again, you guys could pick up on this, but actors just, you know, they transform so much when you've written something, and then John and I had the luxury of doing everything in this movie, or the punishment of doing everything in this movie, but we cast, and, you know, and like we were sitting there in the room because we were saying, well, who's our perfect Madeline? And it was just like one of those, you know, like comedy moments. It's like an Abbott and Costello moment or something. Like a three.
Carol Kane.
What about Carol?
What about her?
And all of a sudden we had a picture up on the thing, and we're going, it has to be Carol Kane.
Of course, who else could it be?
Who else could it be? It was like she was like there, just our Madeline. And then miracles, we begged but no, she really loved it. She loved it. She loved it.
It really made us feel really
The
good
script
about our
really sold us.
people
our
really
actors.
enjoyed reading the script, and
Yeah.
they could relate to the characters, and they wanted to do it. It was great.
Yeah. So anyway, please, I
Well,
we've
yeah.
talked too much.
are you guys, just talk a little bit more about comedy from your perspective.
Yeah, please.
And your background.
Well, it's weird because I'm writing for myself. I only started writing because I wanted to make things that I could be in. But I'm not a good comedy writer person. Like, I don't know. I wish I knew how to like engineer the things like that I like. Like, I love I Love Lucy, and frankly, Mad About You is sort of where I feel like my writing tries to live. Long forgotten sitcom. Because I always, like, this was like, if I could get them in the most stressful position possible, then I could find some funny things in there. But I can't engineer like a bit. So with this one and the last one, and so far all of them, I feel like, it always starts with like as realistic and stressful as a position as I can get the characters in. And then I show it to Matt and Bridget, who produced it with us. And they'll have an idea. Like Matt was like, "Can you get her in the front seat at some point?" Because for those of you who didn't see it, the couple's in the back seat of a car, and she had a fling with the driver, not more than a fling. So in the middle of the car ride, she climbs up into the front seat. So it was like, okay, now I got a little goal, and whatever I figure out, it'll be funny.
Changing statuses,
Yeah. So it's a weird. I wish I could start from the comedy angle, but I always have to start from the realistic angle, and then the comedy finds its way in because I don't know, it's my sensibility, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, like, what I like about working with John is that you do come from those realistic places, because I'm inherently a goofball, and I tend to push the actors towards the broader stuff, and John would be like, I'm not going to make that face. I'm like, okay, all right. I mean, like, I always loved performing comedy. Peggy Ray would know. And so, when I went to the city, I studied the Upright Citizens Brigade, and I like working in comedy film, and the other genre that I've done a few things in is horror, because I like those. I think those are the only two genres that can really get like a very visible, visceral reaction from the audience, either laughter or fear. And that feels a little bit more like theater to me, which is where I started. So it's more fun and more engaging, I think, than like a drama. Like, of course, I would love to make something with Meryl Streep where she cries a lot, but we're not there yet. And then, yeah, the great thing about John is that he's naturally very funny, but he's not a big, broad cartoon character in everything that we make. So it's still, it's funny, but you can also identify with the characters and have some sort of emotional reaction, which I'm very happy with Uber X. The final scene of the movie is one of the first things that we shot. And the first night I was like, I think I made this too serious. I don't know if this is going to work. And then when we saw the whole thing together, it's like, no, okay, people cry. This is cool. Yeah.
One of the things, and it's certainly by the awards you've already received, and you were talking about casting. The casts in both of these productions are amazing, and the chemistry that everyone has, but just the diversity of the different types in yours, and the like you're talking about, Carol Kane and Carrie Elwes and everyone else. And can you speak a little bit about how you go through the casting process? Now, I know maybe we'll start down here because it's a little bit easier, because Jonathan, you cast yourself, I guess, along with Matt. And then we'll work our way back. But now you had, I'm trying to,
Paige,
Paige
yeah, Paige Lindsay
and
Betts.
Jeremy.
Yeah. It all started because Jeremy was a buddy of mine. We did a cherry orchard in Vermont like a year before I moved to LA. And then he came out there shortly after, and we were both spinning into our own LA nightmares, like new to LA nightmares. And I was like, let's make something. And so I wrote that for him. Yeah. So that it was written for me and him, and we needed a Kate.
And I went to Keene with Paige. So Paige and I have a long history of working together, and I actually got to direct her 4 or 5 years ago now in a production of Sunday on the Rocks. And of everyone in the cast, my wife included, her and Paige were the easiest to work with. And Paige, I'd been looking for ages to do a short film with her, and she was in LA at the same time. So I said, John, check out Paige's stuff. And he's like, she's great. And then it happened.
Yeah, casting was quick and easy on this.
On Ghostlight,
Whole different journey.
yeah, no comment.
Man.
I assume there are some that if you're talking about Carol Kane, that you actually, you thought of her and let's go after her.
Yeah.
But how about the traditional audition period? How did that process go for you for this particular
Yeah.
production?
Well, we had two casting directors, one in LA, one in Boston, and most of what our LA casting director did was manage offers. We didn't audition people like Carrie or Carol or even Scott or Roger. I mean, it's funny because these things are kind of like snowballs. Once they kind of start rolling, it's once you start getting some money in, for example, first investor in, all of a sudden it gets more legitimacy and it starts to pick up pace and energy. And so anyway, it was the same kind of thing. Roger Bard and I sang in a bar together on Martha's Vineyard the summer of 1981 in the Seafood Shanty in Edgartown, and we were a bunch of kind of show tune kids in college, and anyway, he was remarkable. Good. It was, and because I did it one summer and I came back the next summer and he was part of the crew and I hadn't met him before and I'm like, holy crap. I'm like out of my league here because this guy's so good, and he goes on to win a Tony Award for Your Good Man Charlie Brown on Broadway. So anyway, but I called him up and I said, Roger, I mean, it was that kind of thing. Well, actually I had to write him a letter through his agent because I had no idea. We didn't have cell phones in the day or email even. So I didn't know how to get him. So I wrote him a letter and said, I'd love to collaborate with you on this. Would you consider doing this movie with me? And he got right back to us. So that was terrific to get him interested and on board. Really started our snowball rolling, and then we started just one character at a time, kind of thinking about who, and most of them we went down a list. You create a list and you have 10 or 12 names of people and you start to prioritize and you just start at the top. You start making the offers with whatever you can afford for the offer to be, so we were determined to try to make this a movie that would have a cast that would help sell it internationally, so have named talent that would raise the profile of the movie and help it be something that would break through. And I think we were successful in that. We got a terrific cast together. And then, but like you say, simultaneously we were holding auditions for some of the roles locally as well as out in LA. And so I read lots of actors for the supporting roles, and then people like Caroline walk into my casting and blow me away, and I wanted to hire her on the spot. So I mean that was how. No, really, because I mean it's wonderful when you discover a new talented person that you haven't.
Who's cheap?
That helped.
Well, let's take it from the actor's point of view.
Yes, please.
When you auditioned for this role, were you given some sides from the script?
Yeah. So we had to think a couple scenes that we did, and I think the scenes that I was given were with a significant other. So I think the audition was mostly like,
Who we should have cast,
can
by the
you
way.
flirt? Which I can. So it was great. It was easy. I think I went in like only twice, so it was.
Yeah, we did read that part in LA, and so as certainly for 4 of the parts, we just thought the Boston actors were better. It really was not even a question, heads and shoulders above. We were reading very good actors in LA. We had, our casting director was the guy who cast Green Book, so he's, a knowledgeable casting person. And anyway,
he did all the Farrelly Brothers movies.
All of them.
Kind of being back to Something About Mary. And,
but
talking about comedy. I mean, he was totally clued in. I mean, people like Scott Adsit, who weren't even really on our radar. I don't know if you know him from 30 Rock, the bald
Pete
guy who plays the
Hornberger.
stage.
Yeah.
But
He's just such a comic
he's
genius, and just the tiniest little things just made me laugh.
So subtle,
In fact, when we were, because you write a movie, you don't think about certain things, and the scene in the because we could see immediately that Scott Adsit is, we knew he was going to be, but we couldn't believe we got him, quite frankly, because we weren't going to pay that much money for that
didn't
part.
make any more than Caroline.
Yeah. No, and so I called his agent, who actually was Carrie's agent, and I said, "You think Scott might be interested?" So, well, ask him. And anyway, once he showed up, he's just such a naturally gifted,
Totally.
funny person who imbues that character with such stuff that we, had hoped for but didn't know. Anyway, so we're sitting there talking about the thing and about the scene, and there was a scene where they're all in the bedrooms, and I go to Scott, I said, Scott, I really want you to, because seeing that, he really wants you to, come on, help us with this, whatever you want to do with this party. He said, I don't even have a room. I don't even have a room. And I'm going, well, you're right. We didn't put you guys in a bedroom, did we? I said, but anyway, so.
Well, the other thing that he brought, which was just a wonderful little moment, was that time where Roger turns to him and says, I need you to play the second witch
The
because
wig, yeah.
Nigel can't, make his makeup change in time. And, it was sort of just a throwaway because we were going to have to get him up there. And then when Juliet shows up, but he's like, okay, well, I think my
Here's
character
my
really likes
concept.
that. I want to play the second witch, and that was just such a brilliant little moment.
Which is, I think, another just a brilliant piece of comedy is like just taking a point. You guys would know, like just taking a point of view and like really sticking to that and running with that is so important because it makes throwaways not throwaways.
Exactly.
Yeah, you build, an actor will build the moments, and you see it in Ghostlight. I mean, a lot of John's credit as a director, but the actors just are, Kerry, who has his personality, but he definitely, and 90% of what Kerry did on camera, I'll tell you candidly, never is in the movie because he's a guy who likes to bookend 4 minutes of humphering and 4 minutes at the end. And I'd be going, John, because he'd go, and he's like just eating it up. We're all like, and then John, he'd do the take, and I just, John, it's like, he said, I got it, don't worry, I got it. Because John is also the editor, he says, don't worry, we're fine.
But he was good. But
No, he did
to his
fine.
credit, though, to
did
play
great.
a bad Shakespearean
Yeah.
is risky. It's
Beautiful.
like, how do you do it badly?
And he did.
And he did.
Yeah.
But that's.
But a funny bad. I mean, it was
Funny
like
bad,
so
yeah,
bad. You don't
But
have to know
he comes
Shakespeare.
back. He comes back. When he turns it on for real.
Turns it on, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean,
know, absolutely.
we took a 3-hour play and used 5 minutes of it, so that's that's kind of the one. I don't mean to jump in because you guys. The one thing that was really amazing part of casting is we had for the part of Elliot some guy in L.A. who I didn't know, but he was an older gentleman, and he was probably pushing 80. He was really an older guy, and he. Came in and he just thought he killed it to our casting guy. Sent the tape. He said, yeah, he's really kind of naturally the part. He's kind of a pompous. Anyway, so we found out that we made the offer, and then he started to draw, and we said, oh God, this guy's going to have to come to Massachusetts. I don't know. Well, and anyway, he walked. And John and I were literally at a place in Santa Monica out there casting, and we're going, oh man, what are we going to do? Anyway, we got Steve, Tom, who's
AKA the face of Guy.
so much better. And we realized had we cast Carol Kane, who's in her mid-60s, with this older gentleman as her
Significant
significant,
other.
she
Yeah.
would have hated it.
She would.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Steve Tom is younger than she is, actually. Even though anyway.
And he just turned out to be
Oh.
a dream. What
Miraculous.
a super guy and so funny.
Yeah.
Oh,
So anyway, those things happen, and usually you hope for good accidents, and that was a good one. So anyway, I'm sorry, you guys.
And how, in terms of doing, just for perspective for folks that are not actors, and most of them not there, how do you prep for an audition? When you get those sides that are emailed to you,
Yeah.
and you don't know that much about the entire
the whole
production?
script, didn't we?
Oh, you got the
I
whole
think you
script?
may have given me
I
the
make
whole
sure, I
script.
try to make
Yeah,
sure.
which
Well,
is so appreciated.
No, I try to do that every time.
That's
yeah,
nice.
because I think, and the first thing I think you do if you don't have the script is say, do you have the script? And then go from there. But I always like to be memorized. I hate going in not memorized. I just think this is your job, so you might as well do it. And yeah, I mean this wasn't so far off from me, you know what I mean? It was like a young girl who was in the theater. It's not like I had to really like extend suspense of disbelief there. But yeah, I just think like, and then just finding moments, I think is really important, just to like read through and say, this is what I could take this in this direction, I could take this in this direction, and you know, usually you read it multiple times, so making sure that there's versatility within your brain.
And when you get to the set, in terms of the collaboration, in terms of what you're looking for, how does that process go for you with your actors?
Well, it's always a really exciting journey to discover the character together with, you know, from as writers, what we imagine, as a director, what I envision, and then what, as an actor, what they embody and how they bring their person to this character is always a crazy and unknown kind of journey. But we did spend a few days rehearsing.
Yeah, we did.
We got the whole cast together, we did a table read, we rehearsed a lot of the bigger scenes, because there was a lot of scenes where we had everybody on set, all together, all the time, and for us to figure out the blocking and how these scenes were going to move in this theater
Kind of like a play.
was really important, because on the day, we didn't have time to mess around with that. We needed to kind of have that determined so that we could jump right in. But then the other thing is, I like to spend time with the actors. You know, you and I went out to dinner.
We did.
And we had a nice chat. I like to just sort of talk with the actors, kind of get to know them a little, especially if I haven't worked with them before, and talk about the characters, see if there's any questions. You know, make sure Caroline was okay showing us her bum.
Which I was. You're welcome.
Yeah, there was no nudity clause in your contract.
Yeah.
Because I embarrassed her. But no, those kind of things. You know, being open with what's going to happen, how it's going to go down, and thinking about who this person's going to become from the page to the screen, and it's fun. It's a fun thing to do.
And how about Matt, for you?
Well, one of the reasons why I keep working with John, and I feel bad on set whenever we work together, is like we'll call cut, and then I'll go to give notes. And typically for John will be like, what about me? I have no notes. Because John pretty much nails it every time. The only difficulty with John is I'll be like, can you make a silly face? No, I'm not going to make a silly face. Okay, fine. I hate to keep belaboring the point, but as per Peggy Ray's excellent tutelage, I learned over time to just ask the actors questions rather than try and say, like, say this line this way, put a pause here. Getting into the minutia of that was like really frustrating in stuff that I've done before. And because this UberX is so specific about relationships that we're not going to see happen, and past relationships between the driver and Kate in the back seat, I would just periodically jump in and ask them questions about what had happened between them in the past. There's one line in the script where Kate says, "Do you remember apple picking in Westchester?" And he says, "How could I forget?" And I asked, like, did you guys do more than just pick apples that day? They're like, yeah, we did. Okay, cool. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and you could really feel that subtext.
Yeah, and that's one of the takes that ended up in there. But for the most part, working, like you said, I typically work with a lot of people who do improv when I do the comedy stuff, because I'll let the actors do it first, see what their instincts are, and then mold from there. And it's always super fun. Yeah, and a lot of times just let them riff.
Let's move right now into more of the production side, and not from maybe we'll touch a little bit on finance, but let's talk about the actual production. Knowing UberX, so many of the shots you were in car, and just tell us about that process. Not just the car, but certainly that's from the viewer. There's a lot of time spent there. So I got to believe that there's some difficulties that can happen when you're traveling around in a car in motion picture production.
Did you think the car was moving? No, I mean,
West Hollywood. And you shot in L.A., correct?
We shot in L.A. Now, if we had shot in New York, you can drive around New York City with all sorts of camera rigs in your car and nobody cares. But in L.A., I know
Look at the cops know the film codes like
So
crazy.
So the house that they go to in the end of Uber X, that's where Jeremy lives. And behind that house, there's basically a big parking lot for the garage that's back there. So we figured the best thing to do to make sure that nobody saw what we were doing, and also to make sure that we were unencumbered. Unencumbered? That's not a word.
Unencumbered?
Unencumbered. There we go. We set up the car back there. We had a big black backdrop that we put up around the car so nobody could see what we were doing. And also, when we're shooting inside the car, it looks like just black night sky. And then we had Bridget and several other people who would come to set with lights, and they were just walking by the car, making it look like cars were passing. And in post, to make it look like it was moving, I went with John out on the BQE in New York, and we pointed the camera out the windows, out of focus, and then I would just digitally composite that stuff in so it looked like the car was constantly moving. And I did a little bit of camera shake, no big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the challenge was shooting it in LA and not being able to afford permits. We had to do something, so we faked the whole thing.
Because I was having fever dreams.
That's cool.
Because we were in pre-production for like a year, kind of. Because I kept writing it and rewriting it, and things kept coming up. And I was like, "Where's this? Like, is the sound guy gonna go in a trunk with his mixer? What sound guy's gonna do that?" And then like we talked about a sound stage briefly, and it was like, we can't afford a sound stage.
Yeah.
Oh, no
Like
way.
it was a night, and then Jeremy had a driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
The real challenge, I mean, like setting up everything was great and all that stuff looked good, but then people are working for free, so around 2 a.m. they're like, "Hey man, I gotta go." So there's a point in the movie where like the lights behind the car going through the back windshield, is it a back windshield? Whatever, the back window.
Yeah.
Those lights aren't moving because no one's there. And then the lights that are going over the windshield, that's me turning them, looking at a monitor with context, like giving directions while I'm turning the lights.
Self-funded.
Self-funded, yeah. To briefly touch on financing, we paid for it out of our own wallet.
Out of our own.
Yeah.
Well, the effect worked because it's not visible.
But in LA, I mean, you need permits for everything.
I shot a short in a parking lot in the valley, an abandoned parking lot, and the guy had to get a permit, and it
Yeah.
cost like
It's
$1,500.
insane. I was gonna maybe do a music video out there, and I was talking to somebody about it, and I was like, "No, I am not gonna do it there." Yeah, it's crazy.
Over to Ghostlight, you guys shot not far from here. Jeff, John, what
Well-
about?
Well, if you want to tell it, I mean, we know the story. We originally were going to shoot in the Berkshires. We were actually going to shoot out in Lenox. That was our dream because we set it in the Berkshires. That was the idea, and this was the French-Canadian idea, which works very well here, obviously, but that was sort of anyway, just was not affordable to take a crew, which is a pretty good-sized crew, all the way to the Berkshires. So we ended up really scrambling. We were going to build a stage. Our partner was doing the studios. That didn't happen because they rented it out from under us. So for a good reason, they were going to get paid for it. So we had like 3 weeks before it, and we actually switched our production designer and da-da-da. Yeah. And we ended up, the theater is 2 real barns. One's the upstairs, and the other's and the house is a house that was in Concord, just happened to be there on 26 acres. It's been completely renovated since we left, but
the barns were a different location than
the barns are
those.
different, and that was all optical. So pick it up there, John.
There were two separate barns. One was all the stuff below, and then the one big open barn. We built that beautiful set in this barn, and I can't believe the homeowner didn't want to keep it.
He said he did, and then
No, we had to tear it.
there were
down.
cattle below. There were
Yeah,
cows.
the cows
actually.
were down below, and
the
we
smell
could
of-
smell and
it wasn't good.
Yeah.
It was a real barn.
But that was a challenge to be out in at a house at a barn and it was cold and
Well, and you've got rains, thunderstorms,
Rain,
and you're
exactly.
producing rain and a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of thunder.
that was all manufactured rain and thunder, and I'm glad that was
Oh.
believable as
Yeah,
well. And,
yeah.
I mean that's hard to control, but we had big rain shower machines outside
Towers.
the windows.
Yeah.
These giant lights that our DP was sitting at the monitor with me triggering lightning bolts, and that was
He
really
was a
fun.
little heavy on it. I said, this is just a storm. It is not the apocalypse.
Conjuring this whole thing.
I said, John has to cut this. He can't just have one constant, anyway, there's always something.
Yeah, but that was fun, and actually the rain was of the effects that we had to deal with. That was probably one of the easier ones. That wasn't that complicated.
Yeah. But we had
You know,
110 effect shots in the movie.
Yeah.
And did you do all that post work in New York or L.A. or Boston?
Massachusetts.
Oh,
We are
God bless
Massachusetts. Most everything we really love to take advantage of the tax credit in Massachusetts. It's a huge benefit. It really helps us.
That we do not have up here.
No,
Yeah.
it's just a shame.
Yeah, you should.
It's tough because if you don't have one, you really can't compete.
You can't.
And I've gone and I've testified in front of at the State House to promote this tax credit, keep it going, because as soon as if it ever goes away, I think we're in pretty good standing right now. But if it ever goes away, I won't be able to shoot around here anymore.
Well, and the other states that have lost it.
As long as there's somewhere else that has it, that's where the production.
And a lot of people are coming here to shoot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no,
Like
it's
within
big
the
right
last 10 years, there's been a huge renaissance in Boston and Massachusetts because it's so expensive. Again, permits, and it's so expensive to shoot in Boston.
Yeah.
I mean, New York and LA. So
They're even doubling Maine in
Yeah.
in Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah, they
because
are
of
for
this.
Hulu,
Yeah.
for the
Yeah,
Castle Rock, yeah.
Yeah.
They're shooting it at the same, our partners' sound stages in Devon's, yeah.
But our effects were done by a company called Sandbox VFX that are out in the Berkshires, and that's become a real hub, a hotbox place for VFX, starting with Doug Trumbull and his outfit that was out there, started out there.
Doug
It's really
Trumbull.
drawn a lot of guys, and our guy John Nugent was one of the prime effects supervisors on Lord of the Rings. And now he's got his little company in the Berkshires, and he did an amazing job, and he was affordable, and we could count it toward the tax credit.
But
So-
just so you know about tax credit, he has an office that's in Massachusetts and then an ancillary office, which is like a desk in New York.
and one in Mordor.
Depending
New York
where
State, yeah.
you want, so if he's trying to gear for the New York tax credit, which is 30% also, but
Upstate New York,
upstate,
yeah.
you're suddenly doing business with him there, and then, anyway. But
Yeah.
he's terrific.
Great guy.
We'll end a little bit with that, I mean, not end, because we want some questions from the audience, but on tax credits, financing, you were talking about it earlier on, in terms of how you got folks together in this. Did you find, was it just regular folk? Were they typical filmmaking angels that would come on initially?
Well, our main investor was, yes. And it's no secret, we partnered with New England Studios, who built a 4-stage soundstage complex in the old Fort Devens, which is kind of in the air, just west of Concord, in Devens, exactly. And so they came in not only as, did we use all their gear and were we going to build our set on their stage until Castle Rock came along, but they actually came in financially as well, which was great. So they definitely have film savvy, and we've been working together and developing a relationship to the point where, I kept telling them, look, being a studio is more than just renting space and gear. It's making ideas. It's supporting filmmakers and projects and making content. So luckily they jumped in and were able to contribute. And then from there we had a handful of other significant investors that were willing to come on board. I tell you, that's the hardest part. It's like each time you start up a little independent film like this, it's like starting a company. It really is. You gotta come up with the idea, you gotta write the script, and you gotta raise the money, and everybody knows that independent films are the riskiest investment in the world. So you do everything you possibly can to stack your project, to make it something that's gonna break out, that's gonna give it a chance to really be seen and be profitable. I mean, ultimately, it's a business.
Well, the film has a great look, what is the approximate area of the production budget for an independent film like that?
Oh gosh, we spent too much, but not enough. That's always the dilemma.
We could have used more time.
We could have used more time,
Yeah.
but
we got a lot.
We're not supposed to talk about the actual budget, but it was not as much as it looks like, which is
That's good.
which I'm proud of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it should be.
And we had a wonderful DP, and there are but there is a baseline of necessary things you need to pay for, especially when you have stars like Carrie Elwes and
Yeah, our cast
Carol,
is our,
I mean, that
it's
was
1/3 of our budget.
that was
Yeah.
pretty significant.
Yeah.
And that was a lot,
Um,
yeah.
And everything that goes along with that. I mean, there's the expectations of what they expect on set and so forth. So, yeah, so it's a challenge.
And how about on the short film? I assume like a lot of short filmmakers go to the credit card.
$5,000 cash.
You can. But how did you guys put them? How do you, for any of your short films, how do you usually put the financing together?
Well, first one I paid for, more or less, and then Matt and Bridget are a great team, and basically they offer their work for basically free
Yeah.
when we collaborate. So that saves a bunch of money, and then the rest would come out of my pocket. And that was the plan for UberX, and I started having a nervous breakdown because it was way more than I thought, and then they stepped in and we just sort of split it.
Yeah. It's sort of like, who's going to pay for the food today? I will.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Thank God it wasn't Uber Black.
Huh?
You guys, thank God it wasn't Uber Black.
That's right. Yeah, so relatively simple again
Yeah.
for this one. Yeah.
how many days did you shoot?
We shot for 4 days.
Yeah.
4 days. Also, I have a partner who I also went to Keene with, very tight-knit group at Keene. He and I, over the past decade or so, have been accruing a bunch of gear, lights, and whatnot. We now have 3 cameras, including the Alexa, that we just own ourselves. And I've got my home office set up as an edit suite for when I work with my clients, because I'm freelance. So a lot of those post-production and equipment rentals we wouldn't have to pay for because it's just stuff we already own. So that's where we save a lot of the money.
Yeah, we were scrappy. Music was written by Jeremy, who played the driver, randomly and unrelated. Like the theme song we used a lot, Daddy's Gone, he just sort of wrote for fun, and I thought it was insane. But I also couldn't stop singing it, and then 6 months later we were like, oh, that's actually a great song for the movie if they'll let us use it. And yeah, things like that.
Calling in lots of favors.
Yeah,
That's the independent movie business.
yeah.
Let's ask the audience questions of the filmmakers and cast.
I love both of you. I have a question for Ghostlight. So sat back and the movie started and meeting this cast of characters, and at one point I had that wonderful feeling of, I know what's going to happen. You know, the thing of the cat coming in. And then at one point toward the end part of the movie, I thought, I don't know what's going to happen. I was thinking, this could get really dark with the killing part. And I thought, there's such a balance in comedy of how much you can really show. And it actually made me a little bit nervous. I'm like, how much are they going to show when it's going to lose that effect? And get a little bit too dark. But it didn't happen.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. That's great. No, I mean, it's funny because as we sort of started to launch the picture through the festival and so forth, we kept getting slotted into the horror genre stuff. And,
It was not good.
And we always sort of, there was always we always called it a horrifying comedy. That was sort of our little tagline. But we never really thought it was a horror. That we wanted there to be scary moments, and I love that it teased you along the way it did. That's great. That's exactly what I wanted to have happen. But that's been a little bit of a dilemma for us in terms of walking that line between something that is scary and something that's funny. And hopefully we always keep trying to lead people toward the fact that it's a comedy, that this is a funny movie. But to that end, it was a challenge.
Well, I think the reason, the people we've had a lot of really positive response to the movie, audiences have really enjoyed it, to your point, is that once the performance starts, I think it's kind of a sleigh ride downhill, and you also really don't have too much time to get too precious about it. And yeah, he's dead, but he's not dead, not completely dead, and so you can't really quite figure. So anyway, I think the audience is buoyed along, and like I said, at the end when they're standing there going like this, and when does the show start? Technically, they should be all running around calling the cops and getting crazy, but I think you just have to kind of surrender to the ridiculously of it, and hopefully that works. And I'm glad that you had that reaction, because, yeah, it does get scary a little. I mean, he does get stabbed. Badly.
Other questions in the back, sir?
now you got Amazon Prime, you got Netflix, you got all these people that are looking for material. Has that made a material effect on your careers?
Not yet. There's one of the festivals where we played was called Discover Film in London, and they do something that some festivals are doing now, which was great, which is they, with your permission, try to get distribution for you. So they're currently working on getting us in trains, like commuter rail in Britain, like a short film package.
That'd be cool.
And especially with a film like this and at this
Yeah.
level, we're like, I don't get, just show anyone anywhere all the
Right.
time. Like,
Right.
you just want an audience because that's why you do it, right? So it hasn't had like a market effect on our careers per se, but like a thing like that just comes out of the blue and it's very exciting and gratifying.
By the way, super random. Did we meet you in New Hampshire last fall and you called me Cloudfingers with this shirt on? Nope, never mind. Okay. Okay, all right, great.
Yes.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
To jump in on that, I mean, I think the new climate, the new media climate that we're in now has made it such that it's not the be-all and end-all to get a theatrical release anymore.
Yeah.
You can make a little movie like we've made, and it can get out on the streaming platforms and on cable and the airlines and wherever else, and people can watch it on their YouTube TV on their
Yeah.
phone. It's great, but there's so many different ways to release a movie now, which is terrific. And it's no longer the situation where you don't feel like if you don't get a theatrical, you didn't do well.
Yeah, I mean-
So that's absolutely the case. In terms of marketing the film through festivals or to festivals, I mean, one thing that we've tried to really latch onto is the whole social media platforms and how through Instagram and Facebook and others, Twitter and so forth, really trying to each area that we've gone to, we really tried to reach out to influencers in the area. We've other theater groups, Shakespeare groups, things like that, put out the word that our movie's coming and try to build an audience and help not only our film but the festival as well to hopefully pull in more people that wouldn't otherwise be tuned into it. So I mean, for us, that Shakespeare niche is really been a good one, and it's been fun to have English teachers come up to me and say, "Oh my God, next time I teach Macbeth, I want to use your film," and that's so great. I mean, how cool is that it actually could have an educational component to it too, so.
I mean, when I to the point of the market change, when I worked briefly as an entertainment lawyer in Beverly Hills all these years ago, and at that point it was 90% theatrical, and then movies basically had no market, and it was 10% was everything else, including airlines and television. I mean, there just was not. And today, except with the exceptions of like the blockbusters like Avenger, which is going to make $300 million this weekend.
No spoilers, please. No spoilers.
It's on its way to being the highest, but anyway, those movies still, they were the exception. But today, for the average small movie, it's 90-10 the other way. All other markets. Theatrical is modest, and if you monitor, which unfortunately John and I have been doing for way too much the last couple of years, little movies come out, they don't make any money theatrically. They just don't. I mean, these movies you think have great life, if they cost $5 million, they need to gross at least $20 million theatrically to even get break even.
Right.
And
the
it doesn't
marketing
happen.
that you have to do.
Marketing, and then half goes to the theater. Anyway, it just
Yeah.
doesn't. So what we ran into a lot was, and again, I don't think they were lying. Maybe they're show business people. So, but they would say, "We love your movie, but how do we sell this? How do we, we don't know how we can make money theatrically with it."
Yeah.
So I would beg to disagree, but anyway. So that's the reality of it. Yeah,
From an
these-
acting perspective too, I don't know if you guys have felt this, but I know when I go to an audition now, I have to say how many followers I have, like on a sign-up sheet or something like that, which is really, really interesting. And I think there used to be this kind of like mystery, I think, surrounding Hollywood as to how you'd get cast, because casting people would find you at a party or they'd find you kind of like just floating around somewhere. But that's not the case anymore at all. It's very, very self-promotion, which is really cool and empowering in a lot of ways, but also like,
Yeah.
Followers,
But,
yeah, you
but
got
our, it just and to that point, our Juliet, Danielle Campbell, who was a Disney princess in her first iteration as an actress, has 3 million followers on Instagram.
That's huge.
Now, have we been able to tap into that and said, come on, Daniel, why don't you just, but it's so funny because her agent specifically said, Danielle's not an influencer. And I go, well,
Yes,
okay.
she is.
She has a lot of influence
But I think if we,
for somebody who's not an influencer.
I think if we'd said, here's $10,000, would you please run our spots? They would have been happy to, but they wouldn't do it for free, and so we're invisible on her
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah.
She's put nothing out about our, and she's terrific at it. I mean, she's a very good witch. And she got to go
Any
like this at the end.
other questions to the filmmaker?
Answers.
Please.
Writing comedy to practice at law.
That was a shortcoming for me because I kept constantly finding the comedy in everything that was surrounding me, and that was not to my client's pleasure, really. But I was so briefly a music lawyer, but I remember going into meetings in which they would be putting away everything, the drugs and all that away, these music producers, and I'd be going in with my suit. And I was the only person in the room making an hourly wage. And, and these guys would be sitting around, and and they go, okay, I got an idea for this. It's going to have the sunrise, and and they had these like ideas that was going to be this, I'm going, these are the ideas, I can do this. And that was basically,
Yeah.
that was not to boast, but it was not a high bar. And so the transition was, there is comedy in the law, but unfortunately, they don't want to pay for it, so,
Well, if that's it, I will say to thank our filmmakers and our cast for being here. And as was said before, if you like these films, use social media.
Please.
Please repeat about UberX and Ghostlight that you loved it. Go on to any of Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and all the others.
Yeah.
It does make a difference. They
Yeah.
all add up.
Yeah, and we will be streaming. I don't know what you guys, when you get out in the marketplace, but we will be, so tell people, hey, you got to see this movie when it comes out.
Yeah.
Because that can really happen. I mean,
Yeah.
movies can be a streaming hit and without having had a huge.
Buzz
success.
still works
Buzz does
in
work,
making
yeah.
a lot of
That's
things,
what's
and especially the
wonderful
movie
about
business.
Festivals like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
This
thank
is
you
where
all
it
for coming.
Starts, yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.